This is the Church of St. Paul in the Desert.
I've entered the 21st century. The challenge of faith is about loving, obeying, and holding fast to God. For that means life to you and length of days. Let me repeat it. The challenge of faith is about loving, obeying, and holding fast to God. For that means life to you and length of days. They're really hard readings, particularly the gospel reading. It's kind of, tough, to say the very least about it. But central to both Deuteronomy and to the gospel is that we do have choices, and we make choices every day. About 15, 20 years ago, I was involved in public education in a classroom, and a very popular discipline model that was being used at the time, and some of you may be familiar with it, was assertiveness training. And the premise deep within it was that you always offered your students a choice. Now, it was a very narrow choice, but it was a choice nonetheless. It was, do your homework or you're going to have detention. But you were very clear and very concrete about that. In some regard, Jesus, or the author of Deuteronomy, is equally clear about the choices we have. They are about how we treat one another, and, if you will, based on the premise that it's not what goes into you, but what comes out of you that is essential and critical at this moment. And it is ultimately about the habits of the heart. What is essential here? What is essential? It seems that one of the things that is present is that as he goes through these lists, it is, what is essential? Where do we begin? And basically, murder is the end result of anger. But we all know about anger. We all experience anger. It is a common human condition. It's part of who we are. Now, some people get angry quickly, and it's gone. Others of us, myself included at times, is that we kind of like that mulling around and muddiness and, poor me, everybody's against me, nobody likes me. And look what this person did to me. But part of what one notices in the midst of that is the other person may have no idea how angry you are. But you, on your part, are working on an ulcer or some other issue. That kind of anger tends to chew us up and do more damage to us internally than to the other person at any level. There's the story about Arturo Toscanini, who was renowned for singing along with whatever he was conducting. And if you listen to old recordings, you hear Arturo Toscanini singing whatever it is, or humming whatever part he chooses to hum. But the other thing about Arturo Toscanini was that he had a bad temper. And one of the librarians of one of the orchestras that he conducted noticed that if he came in a fit of pique, the first thing he did was take a baton and snap it. Now, if it snapped, It was gone. There was no more anger. If it didn't, you would see him throwing the scores, valuable scores, at the various musicians, literally. So one of the things that the librarian decided to do was keep a stack of very brittle batons close at hand. And it seemed to save a lot of music in the process. It would be nice if all of us would have that momentary peak and let go of it. But more often than not, what we do is what I said earlier, let it gnaw and chew within us and do more damage to us than to anybody else. But these lessons are really, as I said, about the habits of the heart. How do we cultivate the heart to understand fully what Jesus is saying? That it is about how we treat one another, that it is central, that the radical reorientation of the heart is what Jesus is talking about. And in fact, Jesus connects the dots for his listeners from outward acts to internal orientation, from murder to anger, from adultery to lust. It is one thing to behave rightly. It is another thing entirely for one's heart to be oriented toward love. Jesus' whole premise was the incredible love that he brought to us in his very being. And if you will, the righteousness of the kingdom of God is more than following rules. It requires and empowers us in a life of surrender to God and to neighbor. What are those things that all of these items speak about? Resentment, alienation, and estrangement from others prevents you and I from giving gifts to God. When we hold on to that anger, when we do all the things that are a part of that gospel reading, the particular interior orientations we must cultivate, the habits of the heart. We proclaim a God present in flesh and bone in our lives, not a keeper of checklists. How often that's what we think. If we just do the right thing, it'll all be fine. But we never understand that it is about the habits of the heart. Jesus gives us, his disciples, a new way of life, not rejecting the tradition, but building upon it. It is a way of life that demands more and promises more. It is the promise of life abundant. And he invites us again and again to be renewed and transformed and made God's holy people by the love that he offers to us and a life abundant. Amen.